Thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I remember there was like a few years ago, I watched a masterclass of yours.
Mm.
And the one thing that I remember so vividly, there was a scene in the Big Ben,
Hmm.
and there was a red scene.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And you mentioned that because it's all red, it was hard to focus, and you had to
Oh, that's right.
switch it to pink because it was easy to do it. Then you
Oh, you have a good memory.
switch the
I even
hue.
forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, although that's a thing in film, because that we shot that on film. And of course, it used to be a thing with red gels. There was a separate, and for some still cameras had a different witness mark for infrared, right? So when you went with red gels, sometimes that witness mark, the standard witness mark wouldn't work anymore. You'd have to kind of adjust. And on film, you never really could find
yeah,
focus. And so I did some tests one day, and the theory was, okay, if I could just get a very deep magenta gel where I could still hold focus, then I could grade the rest of the red in there.
nice.
So it's to make it's less pink and more primary red. But yeah, that's that way, and then it would stay sharp, right? And I could have sharp faces and all
Yeah,
that. Yeah, in digital, it's still, you can get focus in red, but it is hard to see,
yeah,
like you're saying. But the phenomenon doesn't exist, because that phenomenon existed actually on the film layers. Because
yeah.
you're at a layer, you're activating a layer that is a little bit off of the back focal distance.
This
Yeah.
is awesome. This is an awesome trick. I watched again the Big Ben
Yeah.
recently, and I don't know. There are so many cool stuff going on, and I see that there is a lot of stuff. It's done practically, basically. Oh,
Yeah,
everything,
it was all
all
practical.
of it
Yeah, pretty
practically.
much.
Yeah,
Might be a couple of visual effects here and there.
there was like again the red scene
Yeah.
in the club
Yeah.
when he crosses the projector.
Yeah, that was visual effect.
Yeah, it looked really cool.
It was done
But
very well. A lot of people have asked me, "How'd you do that?" It's like, well, I didn't, because it
well,
was done
when
very
the
well.
line goes from the projector,
Yeah.
it's a VFX.
Yes. Yeah. So we did a couple of different passes. We basically did a pass. It's a shot of the light kind of traveling across the room, like you turn the spotlight on, and you travel the leading edge of the beam of light across the room, which of course is impossible. And so we did a couple of passes, one with the light, one with the light off, and then it was very easy for
Nice.
visual effects to
You
create.
know, I tried once with digital cameras. You know,
Yeah.
when you have a projector, and when you start playing with the shutter, like you crank it up too much, it becomes also the same effect. You can find in a way so basically
Really?
the light travels the same way. So
Yeah.
visually you don't see it, but because the shutter speed is so fast, you can see this.
You can almost create that.
Yeah,
Oh,
almost
interesting.
created practically. Yeah,
Oh,
which is very interesting.
yeah, really nice.
So
That's a good
talking
idea.
about the Big Ben, it feels like you had a lot of like creative freedom there.
Yeah, I mean, we had a director who really wanted a cinematographer to come in and make it their own in a way. His name is Tony Krantz, and it's so funny because Tony Krantz he's not an agent. He was like a personal manager.
Hmm.
So he was not a director, not a filmmaker. He would sell, TV series ideas and things
Hmm.
like that. He was an agent, sort of. And but also an avid art collector. He had this amazing. I walked into his office and just incredible paintings on the wall, like museum quality paintings. And he immediately started talking about color noir. He wanted to do, film noir like he would in black and white, only with color. And what would it
Hmm.
take to do that? And
Isn't it never the same thing or it's different?
it's I just kind of called it color noir
Yeah.
because ostensibly, if you dial the color out of that movie, you'll have what kind of works as black and white lighting, more or
Hmm.
less. Although we were adding color to it, and so he asked me, well, what is the primary element that you think to create like a color noir film? And I thought, well, the with color, like for instance, here's what happens when you go into a green screen stage, let's say, right, and you're in the green stage for maybe an hour.
Hmm.
When you walk outside,
Get used to it.
everything looks pink, right?
Yeah.
Because your eyes have adjusted to
Yeah.
absorb all this green, and now as you're walking outside into a different color, it's a non-green light.
So you need an anchor point. Yeah.
Yes, we need an anchor point, and so in typically an anchor point would be white, right?
Hmm.
A white reference and frame will kind of keep your eye from straying off of that color vector that you're trying to, especially a saturated one where your eye immediately wants to correct that automatically. So I was thinking, well, on a big screen movie, the theater experience would be you see that image big on screen, your eye would immediately start to neutralize all those colors, and then what happens? So instead of using white, I told Tony my intention is to use black, anchor black, and let your eyes ground with black, and I proposed that would keep your eye from changing. And he knew about color theory with artists. He started talking about Mark Rothko, and he opened up a few art books, and he brought up examples where painters had done this. Instead of using white, they used black as sort of this neutral reference to keep the eye registered on those colors. And different than Mark Rothko and other painters, I told him I only want to work with the colors in pairs, 2 colors at a time. Maybe bring in a third if we want that kind of articulation, because I was concerned that the image would get too garish, if you get too many party colors going on, because he wanted very, very saturated colors, and I wanted what I called liquid color. And liquid color meaning, when you put colored paint down, it looks very saturated before it dries. When it dries, it gets kind of chalky and almost grays out. When it's wet, when it's liquid, it's very saturated, and it reflects, and it's alive, and the reflection kind of transmits light into the color, so it reflects and refracts at the same time, which kind of gives the color life. So my goal was on film to try to create that same effect by using very precise colors, very precise pairings of colors, and this black reference that's always in frame.
It looks super cool. I watched it again, and it really resembles, because recently I did a project where also I would say color noir. There are some like vivid. I'll show you later, but there are some really vivid colors. And I was looking at your stuff, and I was like, wow, this is cool. This is cool. I like that. Like some bold decisions. Yeah.
I mean, I think his approach invited obviously a complete departure from reality, and once you really almost celebrate that departure from reality, it opens up all sorts of options. All kinds of opportunities are immediately in front of you. And Antonio Banderas, who's in the movie, was really funny because he's a filmmaker also. And we would have the rehearsal, and we'd have the rehearsal just a white light. And because I hadn't lit anything yet, so we'd have the rehearsal, we'd do the blocking, and then the actors would disappear and go to makeup, and I'd light it. And he would always say, I love walking back on the set because it has changed completely from the way it was when he was there rehearsing. And he said he always loved the surprise of walking back on the set and seeing, now it's bathed in all this color, and he thought that was for him, it gave him a lot of energy, So
awesome. Yeah, even the interrogation room, even though it doesn't have any colors, it still looks so cool. Like I'm gonna use this scene a lot for like my future project as a reference, because I really like the look of it.
Well, it's so funny because Tony and I were talking about the interrogation room, and he was saying, well, what can we do with the interrogation room? Do we give it its own color, or is there a way that it could be white light? And then but how do you get white light? And we briefly discussed maybe shooting that in black and white, and we didn't do that. But what we did, and what I proposed to Tony was, okay, here's something I can do. The interrogation room has kind of a top light that's very white, and like some hard lights that come down and hit the table, very, very white. In the background, there's sort of these abstract patterns on the walls. And so what I did was, I told Tony, what I'll do is I'll make those abstract patterns very cyan. I put a cyan gel on them, so they were like cyan blue, very blue.
Okay.
And then in color correction, I could take that cyan and dial all the cyan out until it was colorless.
Or make a different color.
Or make different color if I wanted. I could have made it. I could have made it yellow, red.
Because it's
name a color, because it just was a color that was nowhere else in the scene other than that place on the wall. It was very easy to grab that part and just move cyan to, like you said, any other color or no color. And he liked the fact that we were using color to actually create a scientific no color. but using color to get there, which he thought was, symbolic of what the interrogation is and kind of what the lie of the interrogation is and the trickery of the interrogation. So that theme sort of completely aligned with his narrative of the story.
This is brilliant. Another thing I noticed with this film, you can do like a master class in Dutch angles. Because was there like an ideology, which way to angle it? Because I noticed like sometimes like I figured there was a pattern, like wherever they're looking this way, but then I noticed some ways it was the other way.
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly if we were doing reverses, there was a method there where we wanted, it wasn't random, where we did want, if someone was, if you're, down, left, up, right, I would be down, right, up, left, on my reverse. So the cut would do that.
Yeah.
And not try to follow that same. Generally with Dutching, particularly on wide shots, I try to anchor the Dutch angle onto a straight line that exists. Like for instance, if you're doing a Dutch angle of a house with a gabled roof, you can line up on that angle of the gabled roof so that something in the frame has a logic for what that Dutch is, and the rest can kind of fall into this abstract angle. So in most cases, I was able to do that. Some you just kind of do what feels right, and particularly that, as I recall, that was a widescreen film, and widescreen tilting the camera goes a long way. You have to be. I find myself being a little more subtle with widescreen because it starts to get very. It starts to get distracting almost if you do too much. But I think that we took the Dutch in that film to distracting levels, if not a little beyond. But
I think it's style.
It's a style, and we were consistent with it. And I think, you do a film like that, and you immediately you want to set up. You're basically teaching the audience a language because you're using these effects based on story ideas and based on your wanting to tell a certain story or to a certain facet of a story. There's reasons that you're doing everything. You're just doing everything with very broad strokes and very large moves. But if you use them consistently, the story becomes less random and more authored. And when a story can be authored based on its visuals in movies, well, now you're saying something. Now you're doing something that's not that you couldn't do almost in any other art form. To have a story that's there, written, actors, words, and then have visual authorship.
Okay, so question then: do you like planting some like subconscious, deep meaning stuff? Like I'll give you an example. I had like a project where we had like there was an ideology in terms of the camera level, and it was about God and devil, and whatever was about dark side, the camera angle was a bit lower, tiny bit lower than the eye line, and whatever is about like a God side, we were about a little bit above. It's very subtle. Probably no one's gonna see this, but I don't know. Sometimes I like doing this kind of thing. Do you like planting stuff like this?
Those kind of subtleties add up. There's a cumulative kind of appreciation that an audience has with subtle effects that you're talking about like that. Because as I said, you're teaching the audience a language. If you use those kinds of subtle effects very, very, very consistently, the audience catches on and the audience starts to understand, oh, who's evil, but they're not acting evil, but for some reason they feel evil. And they are, and it's because of your camera placement or your height or your eye light. I remember I did one film where we used different eye lights. So one scene they're talking about money. I remember the eye light itself was a dollar sign. I actually cut a dollar sign out, and the little fill light. So the reflection in the eye, you couldn't really see it, but my contention was you could feel it more, you can see it. But if you zoomed in, you could see there was a dollar sign in his eye, or a star, or some other shape. That kind of suggested what they were talking about.
This is awesome. Yeah.
And certainly like a short frame. If you're not leading somebody's look but shorting their look out the short side of frame, that has a different feeling. If you do have someone walk from the background in soft light to the foreground in hard light, that kind of that change in and out of hard and soft light. We did one scene in Hidalgo Viggo Mortensen plays a man who has Native American blood, heritage, and the chief, he's at Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and the chief has come to him, uh, a full blood Native American, and is talking to him about his mother and all that. And so we put Viggo in the shadow of this flag.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the time that we're seeing Viggo, he's talking to the sun is trying to come through, but it's being blocked by this American the flag that is the flag that is actually, affecting his Native American heritage. And whenever he had a realization, the chief said something, a realization, we killed the wind on the flag, and the flag kind of fluttered and light hit his face. And then Viggo would start to doubt his heritage again, and then the flag would come back over his face. So,
Wow.
so we would do that kind of thing. And who knows if anybody actually
See it, yeah.
they could see it, but who knows if anyone had that same meaning.
Yeah.
The point is that the cinematographer has a meaning for it, and there's a definite reason for him to be there. And the director keyed into it right away, and he started cueing the flag. He started cueing the guy on the fan, saying, okay, down and up and down and up. It just depending on what the chief was saying, and they got very good at really controlling the shadow of the flag that was falling on his face. It was a Western movie. You don't get a lot of chances to do that kind of thing, and you want to look for those opportunities that make the images speak. Alan Davio, one of my favorite quotes of all time about cinematography is Alan Davio, and he said, the images make the pauses speak as eloquently as the words. So his contention was, all the spaces between the words, you have images. And why can't those images be as expressive?
Right. Yeah, I love this stuff. I'm always trying to do some, I don't know, it's just coming from the inside. I want to plan something that probably no one's gonna see this, and I'm okay with it,
Yeah.
But I know it's there, and maybe who knows, maybe someone will pick it up.
Well, too, it's like you're also developing your language just as an artist, because yes, you do a lot of films, but in a way you're doing one big long film.
Yeah.
And you're evolving, and you're maturing as an artist, and a lot of people have asked me, because I'm not as young as I was when I started. Okay, someone said something to me about older cinematographers rely on their old tricks. And so someone actually said this to me. I said, oh, really? It's like, well, let me consider it this way. As some may get lazy and rely on their old tricks. But I think there's a lot of cinematographers that I can think of that are some of the greats that did their best work in their older years. Conrad Hall, Haskell Wexler, Bob Richardson, come to mind. Vilma Zsigmond did amazing work in their 70s. And I think what happens is it's not that you rely on your bag of tricks. Your storytelling becomes much more nuanced and much more focused. And because someone with that much experience does know what works and what doesn't work, but they still try something new. And when you get to the point where you've been shooting film for 50 years, you begin to rely on your gut instinct, trust your gut instinct, and still do something new. Nobody wants to do the same thing over and over again. But you find yourself having an appreciation for story more. You find yourself looking at some of the subtleties of the performances by the actors and wanting to accentuate that more. On Greyhound, I remember just overhearing the director, Aaron Schneider, talking to Tom Hanks and saying, Tom, when you hear the radio say this particular line of dialogue, take a pause, because that's bad news. So I told the operator, oh, did you just hear that? When Tom takes that pause, just do a very subtle move in. He was handheld. So just do a very subtle, just almost nothing, but give that moment some weight. And we told Tom, we're gonna help with that moment. And Tom said, oh, great, okay. And so he knew we were doing it, and it was all just by being aware of what's happening on set, listening and listening to what the director is asking the actor to do, listening to what the actor is wanting, and you start to become a part of this whole team that only gets more and more refined as you work into the years and decades into the industry.
Do you like to operate yourself? Or?
Oh, I love it. I rarely get to, mainly because of union rules and things like that. But yeah, I love it.
Oh, there are rules? I don't know.
There are. Well, if you're in the United States, yes. And in fact, the last film I wrapped a film a couple months ago that we shot in Connecticut, and I really wanted to operate it myself. I wanted to so bad. And in order to do that, you write a letter to the union, and you ask permission for that. I'm not, can I do this? And they tell you yes or no. And many times they've said yes. In this particular case, they said no. And it wasn't like they were saying no. They were saying, hey, look, Shelly, we've had, hasn't been a lot of work in that part of the country, and people really need the jobs. It's like, could you please just hire an operator? And I said, yeah, of course, we'll do that. And so it's because in the past they've said yes to me, so I know it wasn't like they weren't just saying no to me. They were.
Wow, I didn't know about that at all.
Yeah, it's an American thing, and you can always hire an operator and have them sit somewhere and still operate yourself. A lot of DPs do that.
Yeah.
But I kind of agreed with them when I heard it from their point of view. I thought, okay, I'll put an operator to work, and I'll really make them work, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And it's good to hear, because the union was there to help me. They were actually giving me quite helpful information, and so I was fine with it. And so then you start figuring out how you're going to talk to the operator.
Okay.
And one of the funniest things that happened on Greyhound between operators, we were on a gimbal. The film takes place in the Atlantic Ocean. They're on a World War II destroyer, and almost the whole movie takes place in the bridge of this destroyer. So the whole time the set is heaving and turning and up the waves and down the waves, and the camera's handheld. It's not on a gimbal. They're in there too. So, the operator's doing this, the camera's doing this, the actors are doing that, the set is doing this. So everything's moving in a different direction, but all obeying the rules of gravity, right? Gravity is still pulling everything down. So it all had kind of this physiological logic to it. Okay, we had one set that was not on the gimbal, that was on the stage floor, nailed to the stage floor, as solid as can be. The director, Aaron, wanted to do a scene where one camera was on the gimbal and one camera was in the set that was on the floor. And Shelly, can you match the movement? And here's what happened. Both of these operators had been on that gimbal so long. They knew what their bodies were doing because they were feeling it at night. They were using muscles they didn't know they had just to stay on their feet, right? So we had Don Devine on A camera. He was on the gimbal, and George Billinger was on B camera, and he was on the stationary set. They set action, and both of them were in perfect sync. They were doing, one was on the gimbal and one wasn't. They knew exactly how it felt, and they knew how to emulate that. Even George, who had no access to a gimbal, it was perfect. And I remember George calling me on the radio. I said, how's it look? I said, George, you're not going to believe this. It's so perfect. Don't change a thing. Whatever it is you're doing, just keep doing it. And because it was all by feel, and they were like the same person. And that's what you get from operators that not only are good operators, but are good observers of their environments and good listeners and really think about the story and think about movement and why they're making certain movement. So when you've got somebody who's an operator there whose sole job is to think about just that, you again start seeing layers of nuance start to occur that maybe I wouldn't have thought of if I was DPing and operating.
Yeah. Was that a multicam approach on the Greyhound, or it's?
What's that?
Was that a multicam approach on the Greyhound?
It was, and we ended up shooting what I call 1.5 cameras because the set was so small and the lenses were so wide. There was almost no place to put the other camera. But as I said, the set was very grueling to work on because it was heaving and there was stuff in the ceiling and thankfully for the operators, in many of the cases, the sailors had their K-pop vests on, their K-pop life vests on. So if the operator hit them, it was like hitting a pillow.
Yeah.
So it was nice. And then, the actors would help just push them back or something. They got to know the actors very well because the place was just full.
Yeah.
And there were even actors behind them because eventually in the shot they would turn back around and there would be an actor over here, and well, that actor was like leaning on that actor just a minute ago. So it's tough to do multiple cameras, but what we ended up doing was switching the operators out a lot because they would get tired.
Yeah.
And they were both so good, and so I thought, okay, well, we'll have Don do this scene, we'll have George do that scene, and he can take a break and relax his muscles, and because they had to get through the whole movie. They had 35 days of this, and they had to
Yeah.
and not end up at the chiropractor every weekend.
Yeah. That would be cool,
Yeah.
Someone to do massage on set.
A massage is fine. I tell Don, yes, weekend massages. I'll pay for the massages. I get it.
Yeah. What do you like, multi-cam or one camera approach?
I tend to like one camera, and it's funny because I feel like I can move faster with one camera.
Same for me. I always feel like I can move faster because I don't know. It's easier to light. It's easier to frame. You don't have to favor both cameras.
You just think about one thing, and you go and we were doing a film for Simon West, and Jason Statham was the star of the movie, and so I pitched to Simon a one camera approach for that film, and Simon was like, okay, I understand what you're talking about, but you might want to run that past Jason just because he might be relying on multiple cameras just for his performance. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay. So wherever it was, a couple days later, pardon the imagery, but we're in the men's room. I'm standing there, and Jason Statham walks in, and he's right next to me, and he goes, "Oh, so Shelly, I heard you had an idea about cameras in the movie," and we're standing there. It's like, "Oh, really? We're gonna have this conversation now?" Goes, "Why not?" Okay, yeah. That's why I pitched my one camera idea. And he goes, "I'm so happy to hear you say that because now I know where to look. With cameras all over the place, it's like I never know where to put my performance. If you give me one camera,
it was unexpected, yeah.
Yeah, I was really expecting him to say, I'd really like to,
Yeah, because usually action stuff they prefer to have.
Well, action we had multiple cameras for dialogue.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. Action we did do multiple cameras. And he obviously he's extremely good at action and knows his stuff and is in fact quite self-critical. He looks at the playback, and if he doesn't like it, he does it again. He keeps doing it until he himself likes what he is doing. It's nobody else. He's not criticizing anyone else. He's looking at himself and really wanting the best performance from himself. So he pushes very hard. When it comes to evaluating your performance for the camera, the playback is very useful for that. Because just little things like I said with the Tom Hanks moment, that little move in, he knew we were doing it. He could probably go with a little softer performance, knowing that we were creating half of that moment just with the lens. And so he didn't have to do much of anything. He just had to give us a pause and a look, and we were sort of putting the weight on that with him. And when an actor realizes kind of how the camera is contributing to their performance, it means something. And I asked a director recently about actors and cameras and the difference between acting for film and acting for the stage. Okay, in a stage play, theater, you rehearse for 2 months. You workshop for months, trying every idea for a scene, every conceivable idea, rehearse. Yet on film, you get on stage, and many directors and actors just want to roll, no rehearsal, just roll. And so I said to this actor, I said, "You'd never dream of doing a play without a rehearsal. Why is it okay to do that on film? Why would you not rehearse?" And they did have an interesting answer. They said, "Yeah, I understand why you're asking that." He said, "However," they said, "for a play, we're doing the entire story in one night. For film, we're doing something small.
Segments, yeah.
And we might discover something, in that moment that no one had planned on doing, that may work. We might discover, probably more times than not, we discover a complete train wreck of a scene that has become the rehearsal, even though we're recording it. But I think that most DPs, the problem isn't that we're recording it. So now that you record it, all of that is in there. And if later down the line, if an editor decides, well, I don't know, I kind of like that spontaneous moment, even though it's not really intended to be in the film, oftentimes it ends up in the film. And I had an editor tell me once, I think he had used something from a non-circle take, and he was asking me my opinion of the scene, and I said, "Oh, I noticed you'd used a take from a take or whatever, a look or something that wasn't from a rehearsal or whatever." And he said, "Well, Shelly, let me tell you something." He goes, "When that footage arrives into my room and it's in front of me, I have every right to use it." I said, "That's interesting because in the film days, when you circled a take, the lab would assemble those circled takes into select rolls and put all the unused takes into B negative. And they would just be stored but never printed. So the editor all that was ever printed were the circle takes in the film days. So in order to get another take, they had to actually call the lab, get the B-roll out, print this take and that. The lab had to find the scene numbers that he wanted on the slate, and then print that. He didn't have access to any of the B-roll material, the B negative. And in digital, of course, they do. They have access to everything. And that was this editor's point. It came into my room. It was given to me. I'm going to use it. And I thought, okay, fair enough. You're right. I'm just going to be very careful now about what goes into that room, because if those are the rules and those are the new rules, and I think they are, I need to be on my game. When the camera's on, I need to make sure.
It's interesting. Now you're talking about it, and I remember that lately, for probably a few years maybe, when I do some filming stuff, I'm also very careful in terms of what I film, because sometimes, why don't you just roll? Why don't you just take another take? I said, the thing is, if I'm gonna give this option that I don't like, they likely gonna put it because the editor probably will not gonna know that we don't like it and we just took it just in case,
Right.
And then they're gonna put it. And every time I remember when we did something like this, editor actually puts it in, and you look at this, I'm like, we should have put a note or something, So I'm very lately been selective in terms if we don't really need this, do we need to give this choice, because then it's gonna hurt us or something like this,
And that really points to your story. It points to just how important it is to talk to the editor and to make sure the editor knows what your thoughts are on the set. And there's a lot of DPs that don't do that. We used to do it. The way it used to happen was on film, you'd project dailies at the end of the day and the editor would be there. And so generally, whenever I saw dailies, it would be the director, me on one side, the editor on the other side. And so the director in between us. And so we could talk, and I could explain to the editor, in this scene, here's what we were going for, or this, that camera bubble isn't intentional, or I could at least spot, but I could also describe to the editor all the reasons we made the decisions we make, and visually what we were going for, so they're in on this and they know. And you're saying this right across the director, and so the editor was a big part of that communication. Now there are no more dailies like that. People look at the monitors and they think, okay, well, I saw it as we were shooting it. I don't even need to look at dailies. And so the editor is just shipped footage. And sometimes the director talks to them, sometimes they don't. And I always try to strike up a relationship with the editor. It's easier if you're shooting on a lot and the editor is there. If I do films in England, generally the editing room is right there. So at the end of the day, I could just swing by the editing room, and I have to ask the director ahead of time, because their directors are very particular about work in progress, and so I'll usually ask, can I swing by the editing room at prep just to watch? If they can ask if the editor can run whatever this scene. And yes, the directors almost always say yes if it's the DP. And in that time, if we're just running the scene, you're trying to spot, I think, for the editor what's working, and here's what we were thinking, and when you made the cut this way, it really worked for the visuals, at least for the initial plan. Things change obviously when it gets to the editing room, but it's important that they know. If they do know, I think they make every effort to try to make that the plan for themselves. And I think frequently they're just the recipients of kind of poor communication. And for a DP to have to, go out of their way to talk to an editor, it takes some doing. This last film I just did in Connecticut, for instance, the editor was in LA and we were in Connecticut. And so I spoke to him a couple times on the phone, very, very happily and all that. And when I came back to California, went there and met him, very nice guy. And I told him, hey, look, if you're getting close on a cut and you need any color correction, just send it to me. And I can do color at home. And I'll fix any shots that need, if you're using whatever, if an insert doesn't match, or if you're using a drone shot that doesn't match, and you need it to match, I'll do all that for you. So a couple weeks later, I got a phone call and said, hey, remember you offered, here, I'm about to send you something. And so he put me up on the cloud, and I was able to pull down the cut, and I fixed a few other things. And I could talk to him about his cut and what I thought was working, what was great. And we suddenly had this relationship. Because I wasn't getting paid to do any of this. I was doing it because it was best for the movie, and it was going to help our relationship, and I told the director, anything I do for that editor, I want to make sure I'm helpful. I'm adding value by being there. Because most editors might see a DP walk into the editing room and think, okay, oh boy, what's he going to want? And what's going to be different?
Is that a thing on big movies to have an online editor? Or it's...
No, it's sometimes you have maybe two editors working simultaneously, one doing whatever dialogue, one doing action or something like that. Most just have one though.
Because I had a project once when I had an online editor, and that was really cool because right away we could see what's missing or what's
like on the set.
On the set.
Oh yeah, I have had that.
Yeah, and that's I remember I was like, wow, this is some new level. If you have actual someone who can work fast, they basically receive there is a software frame.io, so you basically an Atomos Ninja, you put it on the screen, and when you record, every time it records, it sends a little proxy files to the cloud, and the editor could actually, as we shoot.
Oh, so they weren't even on the set; they could be anywhere.
Yeah, it can be anywhere. Yeah. So basically, as we shoot, receives all these takes, and starts putting it together. And then basically show us what's coming up, and they're like, okay, this is missing, we need to add this, and while we are on set we can fix mistakes.
We had a similar thing on a film I did called Elevation, which is coming out in November, and it was the editor was there, and he was pulling shots actually from the video assist. So it was just scratch visuals that he was going to conform later to our dailies. But he had his laptop right there. He had the whole system down where he could receive it and just cut with it right away. And we were getting all kinds of notes like you're talking about. And sometimes it's the littlest thing. Oh, leave a frame more this angle instead of that angle, because it helps cut. Or they should be leaving a little faster, or the look should be a little longer because I want to do a cut there. And they find all these little intangibles that you may or may not see on the set, but they could. And he was the opposite of being disruptive. He was very respectful about the production process. And the worst thing you'd ever want is for an editor to start bulldozing the production process. And this person was not doing that. They were very, very good about kind of making small suggestions that just made, and the cut is better because of it. And it was a real eye opener for me, because I didn't think even an exit on this angle and an exit on that angle would really make that much difference. But he was right; it really did. It made a huge difference, and it was fast, like you're saying. He had it right away. He could make the suggestion. The camera was still set up. It was very easy.
Yeah.
And so that probably will be part of the future.
So one of the questions I had actually, collaborating as well with an editor and another, but mostly probably about, what do you think about the importance of understanding editing? Because I think that helps how you film, when you cut, how long do you hold the shot, and all that kind of stuff, because I think when I did some editing, my stuff, some passion projects or whatever, I think every time I edit and I know how to edit, it really helps me a lot to understand when I need to cut or when I need to pan and all, like you said, exit this direction or exit a little bit this direction. It all
Yeah,
has a big meaning. Yeah.
it does. And I think that, I had some editing background when I was still in film school. In fact, I worked as an assistant editor. And they were doing mostly like sports films, like tennis, USA Open tennis matches and things like that. I was on 16 mm film, so I would sync dailies or documentaries on Nobel laureates, and I was amazed at what the editors could do and kind of the things that they wanted, the things and what they did with ideas when they didn't really have the footage, and how do they create something. How do you make a scene really build, or a whole film really build. I saw this one cut of these two Nobel laureates who had won. This is probably back in 1978 or something like that. So you can look these guys up. They were two Russian guys. And this little 20-minute film on these two scientists was so profound. And what they were doing was so creative and so outside the box. And this editor managed to just find and land on these moments and that storytelling, and gave their work so much weight. And I remember saying to this editor, "How did you do that? How do you?" And she said, "It's all about just finding the smallest looks, the smallest moments, the little visual cues that kind of amplify what they're talking about." I said, "It's all telling the story." And she said, "You had to kind of go for that. You have to decide, okay, I'm going to give this subject weight," and which was her decision to do it. It could have been a very dry, just account of what they did to win the Nobel Prize, but she decided she really showed why their science was so important, and which I thought was just, I did not see that in the footage at all when I was syncing it up, yet it was there. Yeah. And so, yes, you learn that from being in the editing room. And going back to Elevation, you could tell that our director had learned a few things the hard way, because whenever we got to the end of the scene and someone exited, he would tell the operator, hold,
Okay.
hold, cut.
Yeah.
Hold that frame. When they leave, just hold it, and then he used all those moments. Because if we're panning someone out and they exit, he said, "Just stop, just keep it on focus, just keep it there for 5 seconds."
It's interesting. Like when I work when I'm behind the monitors and I work with camera operators, I always say, whenever someone yells cut, hold 10 seconds.
Hold.
10 seconds, just in case, you never know what happens, and sometimes, like some miracle happen, and you get some really cool stuff.
I know there were sometimes on film or something, the assistant would turn the camera off because it's, they wanted to save film or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, "No, let it roll. I told these operators too, and the assistants, like, whenever George calls cut, 5 seconds of a locked frame. And sometimes like someone will walk into it or something. It's like, okay, well,
I think
we tried.
I think it's overall, I think it's a good practice. Like I advise it sometimes if someone asks about try to edit the stuff you shoot yourself.
Oh yeah,
because that helps you a lot to understand what actually missing and what other angles maybe would have supported whatever you're trying to do. Because usually, most of the times I see people, they just shoot and send it over, but they don't play with it. And I think even if no one pays you, and even there is some other editor who can do this, I think if you just take this footage and try to put something together, it's gonna help you a lot to understand what actually.
Oh yeah, I mean, not only even technically, it's like, how do you optimize? Yeah, and you learn from your own mistakes. It's like, oh my God, if I had just adjusted that frame a little more, or if I had just made that smallest adjustment, I probably would have had this moment, that I didn't have. And yes, I totally agree 100% with what you're saying.
Was there some maybe memorable advice from someone that has shifted your perspective on maybe understanding what to do in your craft or anything, who impacted?
There was one really funny thing that happened very, very early on. In fact, while I was still a student, I went to school up at Art Center College of Design, which is kind of above Pasadena on the hillside. And the classes would be through the day and into the night. So we had classes that went from whatever it was, 9 to 4. Then we had classes that went from 4 to 6 or something like that. Then we had classes that went from 7 to 10. So the cinematography class was one of the evening classes, 7 to 10. And so we get there, and our instructor's not there. And this man walks in and goes, "Hi, I'm Woody Omans, and your instructor couldn't make it today, so I was asked to fill in." And he said, "I just drove in, and the sun's setting outside. Let's all go outside right away." And he grabbed a color chart and a grayscale and his light meter. He said, "Let's go, follow me." So he takes us out to the lawn, and he's looking at the sky, and the sky it's magic hour. And the sky is kind of orange where the sun was. You can't see the sun, but you can see kind of the glow from the sun, orange. And then you look over to the north and it's blue. And he's pointing out all these different color references on the sky. And he's holding his grayscale out and he's reading with his light meter and telling us about the values. And he's comparing it to gray values on his grayscale. And here's what that value is in gray. And all this was flying over my head. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I was listening. I was like sponging it in, and he was talking about exposure and color. He was calling chroma and exposure, and read this, and there's that color up there. If I read that down here, that's what color it's going to be. And on the grayscale, and I didn't get it. It didn't compute until about 4 weeks later, we were given a lighting assignment. This is on film, to shoot neon. And an experiment with neon. And on film, when you're learning about exposure and all that, the common thing is to overexpose neon, because you want the light from the neon. You don't really think about looking at the neon. And of course, on film, when you overexpose the neon, it turns white.
Yeah.
When you start stopping down the neon, if it's a red neon sign, oh look, it goes from pink to red. I went, wait a minute, that's what Woody was talking about. The exposure, chroma. It's like, I get it. And then it's like click, 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 click. And I think it's amazing how I could really not know anything about what he was talking about that day on the lawn, yet retained it.
Then it clicked.
To the point where it clicked weeks later. And I've had that happen to me where things clicked years later. And I have no idea why cinematographers retain that kind of like useless information, that information that makes no sense. And then something happens in front of them and they immediately understand it. And based on this one moment that they sponged in. And to me, there are lots of moments like that. There's a great Bill Fraker quote where he said, when you test, you learn by your mistakes, not your successes. So he said, when you're testing things and you're experimenting and you're trying to figure out what light is or what exposure is or where black is on film, or you learn from your failures. Yeah. If you do it well, you're not really learning. So you have to try to push, and that, to me, I translated that to mean, okay, push myself to be outside my comfort zone. Whenever I was with a director who pushed me to do things I had never done before, the results were always more expressive. And I thought to myself, well, why aren't I doing this on my own? Why can I not push myself to do this? And I realized, oh, well, when I push myself to be outside of my comfort zone, what happens? I'm uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm not doing it. So I said, well, screw that. I'm going to be uncomfortable, and I really want to push hard. And there's a wonderful story from E.T. that Alan Davio told me. And they're doing the scene in E.T. where the two kids are in the garage, and they have these two work lights, these two light bulbs, these shielded light bulbs that they're holding. And they're going through stuff in their garage and they're trying to find little bits for E.T. to make his machine out of. So they're finding saw blades and things like that. And they run across a rag that had the smell of their father on it. It's like his Old Spice or something like they can smell their father. So they have this conversation. And so Alan had the thing lit with these two lights, and the kids are holding the lights, and they're almost lighting each other with the lights. But he also had some other lights in there, and Steven Spielberg kept saying, "Oh, turn those lights off." Alan's like, "Well, I kind of need it." Spielberg's insisting, "No, turn the lights off." So Alan turned off every light until he had just the fill light. He goes, "No, turn all the lights off. I want just the two lights." And Alan, God. And he shot it that way. They went to dailies the next day, and he's sitting next to Spielberg, and on comes the scene with the two lights, and it looked amazing. And Spielberg leaned over him and said, I'll only be half as mad at you. And Alan added, and half as mad is still pretty mad. But he said, I'll only be half as mad at you if you make a mistake playing it too safe than if you go too far. Like, so that was like, okay, that's a mantra.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like push.
Yeah, like I'm doing like small budget films and stuff. I didn't get to big stuff yet, and very often like small budgets you're very limited, know. But very often like I'm trying to embrace whatever is like I know we have limits, but then when you have limits, you start thinking outside of the box.
Absolutely.
Started thinking, okay, we don't have that much light, but what we can do with that, or like we don't have that lens or that lens, and sometimes like I had projects when I limited myself with the amount of lens I want to use, or like specifically like we talk with director, I talk about pitch idea, like would you like to stay like on two lenses, just be like that and that, because once you start doing that, I think you start thinking creative about like angles, how we can make this work and this work. I bought this camera like recently, and it has like fixed a small camera, Fuji. It has a fixed lens, 23 mil.
Yeah.
And some people ask me like, why don't you get a camera with like a lens that you can change? I was like, this is the whole idea. I didn't want to get the camera with different lenses. I wanted to have this only one lens and find a way how to make this lens work.
That's true. Well, when you limit yourself like that, or the limitations are imposed on you, but or when you limit yourself, like with the camera, you immediately put yourself in a position where you are forced to make creative decisions immediately.
Because you want to get a good result,
Yeah.
Good
and
stuff.
what's wrong with being in that what's wrong with that? Everything's right about that. And why not put yourself in a position where you need to think creatively just to make something happen at all? And that's a great place to be. And I remember talking to one cinematographer, and we discussed, if you could shoot a film with two lights, what are the two lights you would choose? And we each chose two different lights, but for different reasons, entirely different reasons. But it pointed out to me, wow, that having that kind of restriction actually opens up countless solutions to how you'd get yourself out of a problem. And it would contribute to the look of the film. It's the opposite of an obstacle. And it's everything about how do you get more and more expressive with these small tools. And I think digital creates that presence sooner for a young cinematographer, because you're not burdened with needing to learn about how film responds. When you learn about how film responds, you get a very good idea of visual construction, what works and what doesn't work, why the rules exist. So when you go to break them later, you're very familiar with what the rules are. So if you're going to learn in digital, you sort of have to give yourself that discipline. You have to create that discipline, because the medium's not giving that to you. Because I think it's a very good idea to know the rules before you break them. However, when you break them, you can start breaking them a little earlier, and start really, I think, discovering your own voice as a cinematographer, and who you are as a cinematographer. And I think that when you look at these days, cinematographers are starting off so much younger now, which I think is great. And what's most exciting about being a young cinematographer now is, now fast forward 30 or 40 years from now, when these younger cinematographers are now older cinematographers, but they have a 10-year start on the end of their career, and we'll be seeing nuance and visual growth to a degree that we haven't seen before. So, and that's going to really advance the art form a lot. So it's all good. And the ones who really, I think, commit themselves to, learning the craft, being excited about the craft, deriving energy from it and giving energy back to it, are the ones that that'll never tire of it.
Yeah. I'm honest with myself in terms of like, I'm a new generation, and I tried film, but I like digital so much better,
Right,
because like
right.
to me, film is like very different world,
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm used to digital, but I like treat digital as film. I like the approach they have, like not too much take, prepping, not rolling too much stuff, like all the approach like treat it as a film, you know. And sometimes I remember I gave someone advice who asked me about like, can you give me like advice in like terms of like camera and stuff. I was like, you know, like don't buy big memory cards. Go on the opposite way.
Yeah.
Buy a smaller card.
Yeah.
This will limit you in terms of what you're gonna shoot. And every time before you press record, you're gonna think about like what you're gonna roll, because like the amount, because the cards are so large right now, and you can just get a 2 terabyte card. Keep on rolling, you know. But if you go the other way again, limit yourself, you know, then you start thinking about, okay, do I need this shot, or maybe I'll just do something better, you know.
Yeah, that's a way to kind of teach yourself the rules in a way. That's a good way to do it.
Talking about the two lights, what are the two lights you would choose?
Oh, my two lights? I think I chose, one of them was a source 4, an ellipsoidal light. Because ellipsoidal light, you can create something hard and streaming, or you can bounce, you can diffuse, you can bounce it and do something very specific with it as a bounce source. And I think the other one was like an Astera tube or something like that. There's a lot you can do with that too. You can bounce it, you can hide it, you can kind of key a face with it if you want. If you have those two things, you can actually do a lot.
Yeah.
And the guy I was with, I think he chose like an inky, a little Fresnel light, and maybe like a sky panel or something like that. I think they chose. So it's like, okay, yeah, fair enough. You can do a lot with those too.
Yeah, I would probably also choose like a hard light for sure, because with hard light you can shape it, you can do whatever you want. And I would take something like this, you know, like a light mat, something small, low profile that you can tape it or mount it somewhere.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't need to do much. You know, it's sometimes it's just a little bit of a, you know, put this thing back there, and you've got almost like a scene there. You've got mood and I think that you sort of develop a language by rationalizing what you have at your disposal. I have 2 lenses, 2 lights.
Yeah.
So whatever my language is, these 4 objects are gonna have a voice in it, and so you start tailoring, you know, exactly what you're doing to fit that that equipment, not just any equipment. To me, the main difference with film is that it really forces you to pre-visualize, and it forces you to create an image in your mind that you want the film to accomplish. Because what you see is not what you get with film. You have to learn what film is, learn how film responds to color and contrast and atmosphere and everything else, processing, exposure, and how to get to this image that's in your mind. It's a lot of trial and error to get there. But that pre-visualization step is important, because when you pre-visualize, you're creating all your reasons. And on digital, what I've seen a lot of young cinematographers do is wait for the image to arrive on the monitor and then start working. It's the opposite of it's post-visualization. You know, it's like they're helpless unless they see an image there first. And so to me, then it's more about, okay, making the image look cool instead of making the image, make it an authored image. You're not creating an image that follows a story. You're creating almost a story that follows the image in a way. And so I think when a person approaches image construction like that, they get good results. They get results that look nice, but there's almost no soul. There's no heartbeat. There's no human touch. There's no author. There's no part of them that is part of that image. They just more or less kind of got lucky and created something that's pleasing to the eye, but not necessarily something that's going to connect, you know, with an audience the way someone who's going through the process that you're going through.
Yeah, interesting. My wife once asked me, like, what's the difference between you starting out back then and right now? And I said that probably the biggest difference is, like, when I started, sometimes I was able to get some really good images, you know, like really good visuals, you know, and I look at this even right now, and I still like, look, wow, this was good, even back then. But the real difference between then and now is there was an accident. This beautiful image just happened because I was shooting different ways and trying to get a nice angle. And right now, I know exactly how to get that. So that's
how to create the accident.
Yes, how to create.
Plan. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, in fact, the accidents that happened, Conrad Hall was, as you probably know, was huge on call them happy accidents. And a door with a glass window would open up and send a beam of light panning across the room. It's like, oh, stop! Oh my God, what's that? Let's do that for the take or whatever. Some little things. And what's interesting about happy accidents is that you sort of have to be in a headspace where you can see them. If you're too stuck on the production process, too stuck on the camera and pixels of it all or the technical of it all, you sort of blind yourself to seeing opportunities that are happening right in front of you. And to me, that meant really simplifying my equipment, making the cameras just functional. I don't really care if it's a camera that has a lot of bells and whistles. I want one that turns on when I turn it on and turns off when I turn it off, and that gets the image that I like, that has the curve that I like. I don't need a lot of fancy lenses. I don't need 10 sets of lenses. I don't need a lot of stuff. I just need something that I can work with and be with. And cameras are one thing, but a tool that you can take through a production and that allows you to be in the headspace that you need to be in is almost more important.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, do you like to storyboard? Do you do pre-visualization or shot list?
Yeah, I do. My process usually starts with the director. I'll read it myself, of course, and I'll come up with ideas. But I usually try to do a page turner with the director very, very early in the process, and for a couple of reasons. You can have time with the director before they get very busy, and before they start getting pulled in so many different directions with casting,
and before they make decisions in terms of wardrobe and production design,
you're getting kind of pure storytelling ideas when you get to them early. And I usually, over the course of maybe 5 days, I'll meet with them for an hour a day for 5 days, and I'll try to go through 20 pages until we get through the whole script. And we've had a conversation about every scene in the script, in script order, and I've got their first kind of thoughts on it. Those first thoughts are usually some of the best. And once I have that, I'll start drawing, just writing the script. My scripts are all marked up, and I draw like a kindergartner. It's like crazy, like dumb, childish drawings about, here, this frame, that frame, or if I want to, whatever it is I want to do, color choices, I'll just scribble. And the worst thing that could happen for me is when they give us fresh, rewritten script pages, and I have to transfer all my notes. I've never gone to an iPad, and I've never figured out how to do it any other way. So I keep all my notes on my script, so that when I'm standing there, the script is with me. When we're doing rehearsal, all those notes are right there, and I can actually say to the director, at our first meeting, you mentioned something about a silhouette for this one moment, and they'll look at me and go, I can't believe you remembered that. I can't. It's like, wow, I didn't. It was something I would have said maybe 6 months ago, and I was thinking, we could. Here's a spot we can do that, and we can create the staging that allows for that, and get the actor, involved with that idea. So for me, that kind of early collaboration is key.
When you collaborate with the production designers and wardrobe stylists, do you like to do this? Do you like to talk about what colors we need to implement, what we cannot do?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the last movie I just did in Connecticut, we had a meeting very early on with the designer, the wardrobe person, and myself, and we went through the whole film, and I had probably the most fruitful conversation with the director in terms of coloring and all that. So I was kind of delivering a lot of what the director's needs were to them, but also listening. But we had, but it was very specific, and the coloring was very muted. So we had to be, if they wanted something to show up, it needed to be sort of like a big effect, because we were really muting everything down photographically. And it was great, because those three departments are very enthusiastic, and they all think about color, and they all have their reasons for making the choice they do. And I love being involved with understanding what their reasons are, and why, and because it only helps amplify what I'm doing.
Do you have a preference? I like always suggesting a deep blue Like maybe because it looks so good on the camera,
Uh,
in contrast with the skin tone.
sure.
Yeah. Do you have like something like this?
No, I mean I try to keep it as as story driven as possible. With coloring, like with something like the Big Bang, those gel colors are all gel colors I've used before. There were a couple that were new. So with gel colors, lighting colors, I'll usually use colors that I'm familiar with just because once you find something that resonates visually, it's hard to find that again. So it's really good to keep track of, particularly on film, what really worked on film. Because there's a few colors that just film couldn't do very well, like lavender. Whenever you did anything with lavender, it would just turn blue because film is blue sensitive. So to really photograph a lavender color was very difficult to do. You had to the color you would get on set would be much more red than lavender is because the film is absorbing all that, and so I think that's probably the only place I think where I might repeat myself just because I want the colors to resonate and I want to get a predictable result.
Yeah. Have you had the projects where you had like absolute freedom in terms of cinematography, like do whatever you like?
Not really.
No.
I mean, I guess the Big Bang would have been close to that. The thing I just did was fairly close to that. And we shot in a 1.45 aspect ratio, so a lot of the compositions were vertically stacked, a lot of vertical compositional elements, and which was unusual. Big Bang, the use of color in the black was unusual. I had a lot of freedom in what to do, but I would show the director ahead of time, since he did have an art background. He knew what color was, so I went through. I had all my colors mapped out, so I would go through scene by scene and explain it. I'd show him the colors that I intended because this is before color mixable lights. So when you committed to a color, you were purchasing that color in gel form. You couldn't just mix anything you wanted. You had to. If I'm going to go with a 118 cyan, I'm going to buy $400 worth of it, and so I had to commit. There it is. So I wanted him to sign off because there was no changing it. Once we were on set, it's like I might have another color, but he signed off on all that stuff. And there was one scene where we decided we really wanted, it was a night scene, and we wanted the smoke kind of going through. We wanted the smoke to be purple. Okay, well, purple is the darkest color in lighting gels. So if you put a purple gel over a light, you have almost no light by the time it gets through the purple. So you usually need to put purple on a massive light.
Yeah.
Because by the time it gets to the other side of purple, it's just now a small light. Okay, so we wanted big banks of purple light on a night exterior in the desert. So we found this area to do it, and we had lights kind of on the other side of the hill. We were going to blow smoke through, and all these lights were going to backlight purple, and but still not enough light. So what we ended up doing was I put the purple gel that I liked into Photoshop, and I inverted it. So just made the negative, which turned it green. Okay. So now I could match this color of green, which is the opposite of that purple. And that's the color I would put on the faces. So I put that green on the faces, and I left the purple light white. And then when I go to color correction, I say, make that light this color purple, and the faces should normalize.
Yeah.
And they did.
Did you do tests before?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Because the faces did get a little gray. Maybe put green light on faces, and then the faces become very muted. In fact, there's a lot of, I think Dante Spinotti, that's a technique of his. He'll frequently light faces with green gel and then dial the green out, and that makes the faces very kind of almost gray. It's really interesting. So that I was getting that phenomenon as well, but I was getting my purple smoke without using the purple gel, which was knocking my lights down to nothing. The lights had no gel on them at all. They were white.
Yeah.
I made them purple later, but when everything else swung purple, when the purple was added to that green, it became
Yeah, great technique, great technique. Yeah, I remember I did some tests about it. I didn't actually use it on any project, but I did tests about it because I think I've heard this on your master class as well.
Oh yeah, no,
About
maybe
this
I
one,
may have
yeah.
told that.
And
Yeah.
I was like, this is genius, you know, this is genius.
It had to work, and it was on film, so we had to test it. It'd be easy to test on digital because you could just kind of
Yeah,
play with it, just right with the
they'll
camera
make a
settings.
lot right away. Yeah,
Make a
yeah,
lot, and you at least white balance. You could there's a way you can kind of play around with it.
yeah.
Um, you get to it much faster and probably even have more control. We shot the Big Bang up in Spokane, Washington, and our colorist was in Seattle. So I remember in order to test this effect, I shot the test in Spokane and drove it to Seattle
Nice.
to sit with him, so he could arrive at this setting so he had a reference. So when he got the footage later, when I was still on set, he knew exactly what we wanted. Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
What's your process like when you work on sets, and how do you start like thinking about where to put lights on, how to do like camera placement, movement, anything? How is your process? Like you walk into set or location.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have lighting wise, I'll usually have a pretty good idea what I'm doing ahead of time. At least I'll have an idea of basic things I want to lay in, and I'll try to lay that stuff in ahead of time, all the time consuming things.
Even before you saw the location.
No, no, after you see the location, but before I shoot.
But like if you like start right away, like you see
Okay.
the location,
So if I'm
you
walking
start
blind,
yeah,
okay,
you
yeah,
start getting ideas like
sure.
how to do this.
Yeah, I start looking for where are the opportunities. And obviously you're considering the scene, you're looking at the story. You don't do anything until you figure out what it is you're saying with the scene. So I'll usually evaluate what is the primary thing I need to leave here today. If I leave with nothing else, what's the one thing this scene needs? Whatever it is, this emotion, this information. How do I tell that story? What's the key element that I need? And then I'll start thinking about, okay, how can I accentuate the receiving and giving of that information to the audience? What can I do to create that connection for this vital piece of information? Then what are the nuances? What are the actors thinking? You know, are they being honest with each other? Are they being dishonest with each other? Who deserves to be in the light? Who does not deserve to be in the light? Does the light need to change during the scene? Uh, it says day here. Does it really need to be day, or can it be? Can I force the time of day into something else? Just because it says day doesn't mean it has to be day for me. Day can mean a lot of things, and I will openly and with glee change the look of a room. Just because the window's over there doesn't mean the light comes from over there. The light comes from the story, and not where some architect put a window 100 years ago, and so it's I think it's most important to kind of evaluate what it is that you're trying to get out of the scene and what you can bring to it. That's going to create that connection for the audience in the best possible way.
Yeah. How do you deal with like stuff like, well, you probably have like lots of ideas, but you're not the director. It's the director decision, and you have those ideas. How to nicely pitch them,
Sure.
and not to push it too far,
Sure.
What's your any advice? What's your
There's
process
the
on
rule
that?
of two. There's a yes. So I'll have an idea, and I'll pitch an idea. When you pitch an idea, you're trying to get people to want to do it, right? You're trying to make the idea sound like a good idea. So you're pitching the idea, but sometimes the idea just doesn't land on them. And they go, oh, no, Shelly, I don't know.
Are they too busy to
No.
hear? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, all right, fair enough. And then I will pitch an idea twice and no more. And so the next time I pitch it, it might be a couple days later or even later that day. Let's say it's an idea for that day. I'll say, okay, I'm gonna pitch this one more time. And the first time you didn't like it, but let me give it one more go. And this, that. If you acknowledge, it's like, okay, I'm only pitching it because I believe in it. I believe it can work. And just make sure if you're going to say no to it, that it really doesn't work for you. If it doesn't work for you, it's an idea for another movie. And I usually will tell that to them. It's fine. I'll take this idea, down the road. So I'm not. if the answer is no, the answer is no. I'm ready to move on. But I'll pitch it twice just in case. And it's amazing how many times it sells the second time. And not only that, but let's say I'm doing that early in the process. Let's say I'm talking. It'd be great if we had a silhouette shot on this, and I sell it twice, and the second time the director buys it. Great. So we're working with a silhouette. Now we're to the shooting stage. Well, why are we doing a silhouette here? I can't see her face. I say, okay, I have to resell the idea now. Remember, we discussed the strengths of the silhouette mean this, that, and in the context of telling the story, seeing her face was less of our priority, and the strength of that silhouette was the priority. We can change it, but I still believe in the original idea. And like, no, let's go through it. Or they'll say, no, I need to see your face. I'm paying this actress, whatever it is, $4 million. I need to see her face. Whatever it is. And you make every effort to get your best work on the screen. But ultimately you're there for them. It's totally okay. And I maybe early in my career I would get offended if some of my ideas were shot down. But now it's like, it's really if it's not resonating, if the idea isn't working for the director, it's just not a good idea for this moment. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means it's a bad idea for now. And try to key into exactly what they do want and stop trying to sell them something they don't want. And make sure that if you're going to shift gears, make sure you really understand, how you can really help this person. And because when you think about a director, I have a lot of empathy for directors because their lives are very complicated, especially shooting. They have to deal with a director's life. It's nonstop questions from every department, and so little of what they have to deal with has to do with the actual shooting of the scene. So I try to really help. And on Jurassic, I did the third Jurassic Park, and even it was affecting me because all day long I was being showed plans for future sets. It was nothing but distractions of shoot the scenes in front of us because the film was so big and so technical. So I told my gaffer and assistants, I said, "Hey, what? We're going to draw an imaginary 12-foot circle around this camera, and if I'm inside the circle, nobody brings me plans. Nobody. That means I'm working on the shot. And if I leave the circle, I'm fair game." So we started working, and it started to work. At least I had a place that I could go to work. And darned if, like, maybe 4 days later, the director's chair started to creep closer to the circle until he was in the circle. And now he was protected. He didn't even know he was doing it until like a few days later when I said, "Do you realize what you just did?" It's like, "You're now in the circle, the protected circle." He goes, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, have you noticed that when I'm here, nobody brings me anything?" He's like, "That's crazy." Yeah. So he just did it because, the focus on the shot over there was something he really wanted to be part of. So he came and joined us, and then he was in the protective. I don't do that very often, but on that film, it worked, but it just kind of shows you how difficult a director's life is and how hard it is and how much they would really rather focus on the shot, but sometimes
are there any other tricks you bring from set to set like this?
Sometimes I'll pull out something like that. There's one funny thing in film. When we were shooting film a lot, of course we look through the viewfinder a lot, and if it was a hectic night exterior and I'm buried all night, there was a few times where I'd be looking through the viewfinder. When you're working in film and you're looking through the viewfinder, people normally wouldn't disturb you. They would wait till you're done, pull your head away, then they'd talk to you. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking through the eyepiece, that's not the time to talk to the DP. People just kind of wait. So there were a few times where I'm looking through the eyepiece. I've got this eye closed, and then I close this eye for like 10 or 15 seconds, and no one knew I had this eye closed, but my eye was against the eyepiece, and I was protected. I was alone for 15 seconds, and I could just be with myself for 15 seconds, and no one would bother me, even though I was in the middle of like a beehive of activity, until I pulled my eye away. And so I could kind of reset myself. If I was feeling behind the 8 ball or a little upset, I could just kind of reset myself and be totally fine.
I remember Dickens mentioned that he went to smoke outside because it was the only time he could step away and think about it. So no one talks to him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Even for a minute.
Yeah.
It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask like questions this or that, and you're just gonna choose.
Okay.
What do you prefer? You know.
Sure.
Okay, film or digital?
Actually, you know what? Digital.
Daylight or night?
Oh, night.
Static or dynamic shots?
Oh, boy. That's a 50-50. I'm going to say static.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of strength in a static shot.
Do you like shooting more on stage, studio, or location?
I like both, but I do like stage.
Scripted or improvised?
Scripted.
Storyboarded or figure out on the day?
Storyboarded.
Wide angles or close-ups?
Wide angles.
Natural light or artificial?
Artificial.
Color or black and white?
Ooh. Color, I think.
Okay, favorite tool? Dolly, Technocrane, Steadicam, handheld.
Technocrane. A lot of people are going to say technocrane.
True. I like Dolly.
That was good.
Yeah.
I do too.
Epic scenes or intimate moments?
This like depends on the part of you that you're trying to kind of stimulate. The epic scenes really make you feel like you're part of the filmmaking process, but the intimate scenes can be probably the most rewarding. If you hit an amazing intimate moment, you've really said something.
Long takes or quick cuts?
Long takes.
Tungsten, HMI or LED?
What's the first one?
Tungsten, LED, tungsten, HMI or LED?
LED.
Experimental or classic techniques? Like, do you enjoy experimenting with new
Experimental,
techniques?
definitely, yeah.
Fixing on set or fixing on post?
Oh, thanks.
That's an obvious one.
Yeah, I want to know the total. I want to know the consensus after you ask a few DPs these questions. Is it good?
Yeah, actually, I'm planning on asking this question.
Yeah. I
see,
hope so.
Small crew or big crew?
Something I like about a small crew. Depends how small, but
I mean, to a reasonable degree.
small. I'll choose small. You know, it's like all my choices, I think, have to do with what gives you flexibility, what gives you a room to move, and sometimes it's not necessarily what you think it is. And like I chose digital over film, which sounds I'm surprised to hear myself say that, but I did choose digital over film, and because today I feel like digital is a little more flexible. You can do more with digital. There are certain things you can do with film that you cannot do with digital, that are textural and magical, but you can't make every film that way. You know, with digital, you can go from film to film to film and make a career and change digital and really pull the best out of that. That's my choices tended to be like that. What can I take forward for years, not just one scene today kind of a thing. What are your answers to these?
Oh, I did not expect that.
I asked?
Yeah. This.
Okay. Film or digital?
Yeah, digital, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but you answered that already. Daylight or night?
Night.
Okay. Daylight can be good too. Really great daylight can be great too.
Yeah, it's hard, but I probably prefer more moody stuff, you know, so night.
Yeah. Static or dynamic shots?
Static.
Oh, good. I was surprised I answered static also, but I think there's power.
I really like static because I think there is I don't know, I can't explain, but there is some kind of power in static shots, you know. I think it's if you can make a static shot look great, I think that's they can tell.
Making a statement.
Yeah, making a statement.
Yeah. On stage or location?
Location. But
I chose stage because it's like you're starting with nothing.
Well, those questions are not designed for me because I don't have that big experience in doing big stages and stuff.
Fair enough. Scripted or improvised?
Scripted.
Storyboard or figure it out in a day?
That depends. Some projects I like to do very strictly scripted, but sometimes like recent projects I didn't storyboard. I didn't do any shot list. I had so vividly in my mind that I didn't have to do anything of that.
Yeah,
and it actually worked. It paid off because I didn't miss any shots. I didn't like skip anything that I wanted. Everything that I wanted was like vividly in my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, but some projects I really like to. Depends. Really depends. Yeah.
So properly pre-visualized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wide angles or close-ups?
Wide angles.
Or you do a close-up with a wide angle lens.
Yes, exactly.
Natural light or artificial?
That's a tough one. I really like natural lights, but I always go for natural look with artificial lights.
Yeah. Just to have the control.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Color or black and white?
Color.
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 Have you done much in black and white?
Not much. I like black and white, and every time I do black and white, I'm like, oh, it's so cool. But yeah, there is something about color, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Favorite tool? Dolly, Technicrane?
No, that, yeah.
Okay. Well, you let me get to the other two.
Yeah.
Dolly. Okay. You like
Dolly.
Dolly. Epic scenes or intimate moments?
That's intimate moments.
Yeah. Long takes or quick?
Those are the intimate moments. So those are the ones that sometimes you roll and you have like a.
Yeah. You know, Alan Davio, I asked him his favorite scene from Empire of the Sun. It was a tiny little scene where the boy is moving out of his room. It was a scene that I never would have dreamed. A movie like that, and it was just the boy and the camera in the space. And it's like he just thought that's where he hit it. And it's really interesting. I think a lot of people would choose that.
Those are the scenes that usually everyone starts clapping, you know, because those impact you the most, I think.
Yeah, right. Well, long takes or quick cuts?
Long takes.
Okay. Tungsten, HMI, or LED?
Tungsten.
Very good. Experimental or
But
classic?
I mean, tungsten is my.
Tungsten's clean and
I prefer tungsten, but nowadays it's way easier to do LED. You know, faster, smaller, flexibility.
Yeah.
But I like the look of tungsten. I think it's hard to beat. Even though like I know right now the lights, and I'm a big advisor to like LED lights and all that kind of stuff. But still, you know, there's something about the tungsten quality that I can't really get.
Oh yeah, well there's like no artifacts, there's no strange little peaks and valleys in it. It's
if you ask me about HMI and LED, I would choose LED 100%. But the tungsten is still in my heart.
Yeah, well no, that's not a bad place to be. You'll have to buy a lot of gel.
But maybe mix, you know, for faces you use tungsten, for the rest of the stuff you use.
Yeah, actually, that's where I think LED
Yeah.
gives itself away on the faces. Yeah, you're right. Okay, experimental or classic techniques?
Experimental for sure.
Yeah, good. Fix it on the set or fix it in post?
Definitely on set.
Yes. Small crew or big?
Small. I like maneuverability. You know, I like if there isn't something. If something came up on the set, you know, like, you know, it's anchored to something, you know, so you can move.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, who am I to talk about this? I didn't have any like big.
You're still you're entitled to your opinion. It's and you start in a place and you know that's how you set your trajectory.
Yeah. But I think like I like keeping tight crew because I think when it's a tight crew, there's many movement parts, you know, moving parts.
Yeah.
So when there is like big crew, it starts like someone went to a restaurant, someone went this and this, and you start putting it all together, and it just takes way longer, you know.
Crew too kind of becomes your family in a way, because you know I've had the same crew for a long time, and you kind of live together through everything. You live together through, you know, all the good times and the bad, you know, literally everything, births, deaths, you know, divorces, cancer, all different things that all the different crew members may have, and you kind of get through everything. And a good crew is much more than just a group of technicians. They're an extension of kind of who you are as a person, really.
Same for me. I like to work with the same crew over and over, you know, if possible.
Yeah.
Like there are many reasons for that. Yeah, for family. But again, like it's you don't have to explain. Again, it's the same stuff. They already know your stuff. They know how you like it, how you don't like it, how to do that and that. You know, so you don't have to explain yourself every time. You know, you with your crew, you focus more on your craft instead of trying to micromanage the
Oh
rest.
yeah. And they know when you're in trouble. They know when I'm looking for an idea. They know I've been surprised, and it's like, okay, I'll say politely to the director, okay, well, that sounds great. And the key grip will come up to me and go, you don't know how to do what you do. No, I have no clue.
So you're open on sets for ideas, yeah?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially by the director. And you have to be. Yeah.
I mean, from the crew, you know.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. 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 I mean, even when you go, like, for instance, when I was in Connecticut, there was a whole crew that I hadn't worked with before. I hadn't worked with, and as a camera, a couple of camera people I'd worked with before, but the grip and electrics, first time. And they were kind of young guys. And, but they had a lot of ideas for techniques that other DPs had taught them and that I had not heard before. And they had some really great ideas and really good ideas of certain lighting units I'd never seen before. And so I think they learned from me too. They certainly learned from a preference point of view what I like, but I did like a lot of their ideas. And it was like, it's fun to work with a fresh face every now and then. But there's no reason that can't continue even with a seasoned crew. A crew you want to keep that kind of interchange alive, and so that they do feel they can say anything, and they're only trying to help, and you really don't put them in a position to help you.
Yeah, there is one question I remember that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Like, do you still educate yourself? Do you watch I don't know, some masterclass? Do you watch YouTube, like, I don't know, some new gear stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Some
Like when I started doing more color correcting, I was watching tutorials on that. Even though I know a lot about color correcting, because I usually when I'm grading, I sit right next to the colorist. Even in DI theater, I'm right up there next to them, and I ask questions and learn, and so. But yeah, I definitely will. There's a lot of things to learn. Even reading old interviews, there's that songwriting thing where if you like a song artist, uh, listen to the kind of music that they liked, and then listen to the kind of music their heroes liked. The same thing goes for film. If I like Alan Davio, let's say, well, Alan Davio was a real fan of Billy Bitzer. Okay, I'm gonna look at all the Billy Bitzer scores. There wasn't anyone in front of Billy Bitzer because he was at the beginning of everything. But you can kind of at least go back and find out whose heroes your heroes liked, and it kind of informs you, if not about a technique or a way to kind of photograph something. It might tell you more about what's the type of person you need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
it
you.
was so much fun,
All right.
I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Thanks.